My name is Luna Cross, and if there's one thing I've learned in my 25 years of life, it's that sometimes the family that abandons you does you the greatest favor of all. When I was 16 years old, I was working on our small ranch in rural Montana, cutting grass and feeding livestock, when my television-perfect parents appeared before me with their precious adopted daughter in tow. They looked like they had stepped straight out of a magazine spread about successful suburban families, all polished smiles and designer clothes that cost more than our farm made in 6 months. My mother took one look at me and wrinkled her nose in disgust. "Good heavens, Luna, you look like a vagrant," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of disdain that only comes from years of practiced superiority. My father said nothing, but the revulsion on his face spoke volumes about what he thought of his biological daughter after all these years. Victoria Pierce, their cherished adopted daughter, stepped forward and reached for my hand, though I could see her struggling to hide her own look of disgust. She was everything I was not, with her perfectly styled blonde hair, manicured nails, and clothes that probably cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "Sister," she said with practiced sweetness, "you have suffered so much all these years. Please come home with us now." I barely had time to furrow my brow before she stumbled backward several steps as if I had pushed her, nearly falling to the ground before throwing herself into my mother's arms with dramatic sobs. "Sister doesn't like me, does she? Maybe I should stay here instead, Mama," she wailed, her tears flowing like she had turned on a faucet. I stood there holding my grass-cutting machete in one hand, looking at this little performance with the kind of calm that comes from years of dealing with genuine threats. "Are you absolutely certain about that?" I asked her quietly. When she nodded emphatically, still sniffling into my mother's expensive blouse, I did what came naturally to me after years of defending myself. I slapped her once across the face, clean and sharp, and then backhanded both of my so-called parents before they could even think about getting angry. "How dare you?" I said, my voice steady as granite. "Have you forgotten exactly why you abandoned me in the first place?" Everyone said I was cursed from birth, inheriting my biological mother's depression, my father's manic episodes, my grandmother Rose's paranoid tendencies, and my grandfather's violent streak, all while being abandoned to boot. But I had never seen any of these traits as problems, mainly because from childhood onward, nobody had ever dared to cross me. When I was 7 years old, my grandmother Rose passed away from illness, leaving me completely alone in the world. The townspeople in our small Montana community had been watching our ranch like vultures, waiting for their chance to drive me out and claim the land for themselves. I picked up my rusty grass-cutting sickle and marched from one end of town to the other, making it crystal clear what would happen to anyone who tried to take what was mine. Then I spent 3 days crying at the mayor's house, threatening to call the police if anyone tried to force me out. After that little demonstration, the number of people with designs on my property dropped considerably. When I was 10, the town bully decided he wanted to assault me, announcing to anyone who would listen that he was just waiting for me to grow up a little more before making me his woman. That very night, I took a sledgehammer to his front door and left him with a simple message. "I am only 10 years old. Think carefully about what that means." The bully never got a chance to respond because his wife showed up the next day to give him a piece of her mind about being a conscienceless monster, then came to apologize to me personally. From that point forward, everyone in town understood that I was completely unhinged and had no regard for my own safety. They limited themselves to whispering behind my back about how I was a cursed star of misfortune. No wonder my own parents had abandoned me. They said I had killed my grandfather just by being born and had killed my grandmother Rose when I turned 7. They called me a harbinger of doom. None of this particularly bothered me. In fact, the more they talked, the easier my life became, since nobody dared to actually confront me. I had assumed my life would follow a predictable pattern: finish high school on government assistance, find some kind of work, and just get by. Then my biological parents showed up when I turned 16. My instincts told me immediately that they had not come with good intentions, but having bad intentions was fine with me, because I remembered they had money, and due to certain circumstances, I was desperately short of cash at the moment. The monthly examination fees and medication costs for my bipolar disorder were completely beyond my means. I could choose to be crazy when it suited me, but I could not afford to be crazy when I had no control over it. Actually, my depression symptoms were quite mild. If it were not for my biological mother's history of depression, I would most likely have been diagnosed with pure mania instead. After they each took a slap from me in the field, all three of them stood there in stunned silence. Victoria Pierce stared at me in disbelief, her hands trembling as she tried and failed to find words. My mother, Margaret Pierce, covered her face and looked at me with complete devastation in her eyes. "I knew it was a mistake to have children," she sobbed. "You insisted I go through with the pregnancy, and now look what we have. She will even attack her own biological parents." My father, William Pierce, turned red with rage and raised his hand to strike me, but when he saw me slowly lifting my machete, he forced himself to lower it again, his whole body shaking with fury. "Animal!" he spat. "Absolute animal! We are taking her straight to a mental institution. We cannot afford any complications before the meeting with the Hayes family." The moment he mentioned the Hayes family, Victoria Pierce's face turned noticeably pale. I could easily guess that the Hayes family was some wealthy dynasty the Pierces were hoping to marry into through an arranged union. I burst out laughing, making no attempt to hide my amusement. "How fascinating," I said. "You are so eager to sell your own underage daughter. Even more fascinating is that some people want to be sold, but since they are not blood relatives, the buyers are not interested. Ha 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 ha." This time Victoria Pierce's face turned truly ugly, and when she looked at me, her eyes burned with bone-deep hatred. I was completely indifferent to her malice. After all, why would anyone worry about a person whose only weapons were tears and manipulation? Someone with no real capacity for violence. Besides, she was perfectly sane. This thought made me laugh even louder, while my biological parents looked like they were about to die of apoplexy. In the end, I did go with them, mainly because I needed medical treatment for my condition. I had managed to survive this long, and I wanted to live even longer and achieve even more. Everything I wanted should be within my grasp. As we drove away, the entire town was practically ready to set off fireworks in celebration. I was leaving, apparently never to return, and they would finally have their chance at my ranch. But how could I possibly let them have their way so easily? As we drove past the property, I rolled down the car window, pointed at the ranch, then pointed at the townspeople and mouthed the words, "I will be back. Do not let me catch you trying anything." Their faces changed color immediately, and they all avoided my gaze, hating me so much their teeth probably ached. After more than 4 hours of driving, we finally arrived at the Pierce family mansion in downtown Chicago's wealthy district. These people had truly been living well these past few years. While my grandmother Rose and I had been scraping by with irregular meals in that small town, they had been living this life of luxury and decadence in Chicago. Even when Grandmother Rose was seriously ill, none of them had bothered to visit even once. I actually had called them back then, crying and begging them to come back and save Grandmother Rose, but I had failed completely. What had my parents said to me at the time? They had told me, "Your grandmother was evil her entire life, and now that she is dead, she is getting exactly what she deserved. You are a little monster who should have died right along with her." From that moment, I understood that I had no family left in the world. Grandmother Rose had been suspicious by nature, but toward me she had genuinely shown love and care. Without family, I had no constraints holding me back. If these people thought they could use me to gain advantages for themselves, they would need to see whether they actually had the ability to pull it off. When we reached the mansion entrance, they did not let me get out of the car. Instead, they dropped off Victoria Pierce, instructing her not to overthink anything and to rest well at home. Then they drove me directly to the hospital. The diagnosis process went smoothly because I was extremely cooperative throughout. However, I concealed certain facts, things my parents did not know much about. For instance, as revenge against the town bully, I had killed 6 of his chickens, sitting at his front door and bleeding them out one by one, plucking their feathers. The bully had been so terrified that he stayed sick at home for 2 weeks. I did not mention any of these incidents that might worsen their assessment of my condition and potentially extend any required hospitalization. I had expected to be hospitalized for at least 2 weeks, but my father received a phone call and returned, looking grim, politely declining the doctor's recommendation for inpatient treatment. He claimed that with family care and support, he believed I would recover much faster at home. This was obviously complete nonsense, but I had no objections. Being able to go home and torment all 3 of them would probably do more for my symptoms than any hospital stay. Sitting in the car on the way back, my parents sat in the front seats, not even bothering to glance at me. My father spoke in a dark tone. "From now on, your name is Luna Hayes. Remember that you are a Pierce family daughter. I will give you money and send you to school, but you must obey me unless you want to go back to living like an animal." I smiled slightly and immediately launched into my response. "Obey you? Let you sell me off like livestock? Do I look mentally deficient to you? Or have one of you been diagnosed with cerebral palsy and you think I inherited it?" My mother was so angry she started rolling her eyes back and trembling. "You insisted on bringing her back, but if she acts like this during the arranged marriage, she will only cause trouble for our family." My father snapped back at her. "What choice did we have? The Hayes family discovered that Victoria is not our biological daughter. And besides, Victoria may have feelings for Dylan Hayes, but do you not understand what kind of man-eating den the Hayes family is? Even if the Hayes family had not found out the truth, we could never send Victoria into that hell." My eyes moved slightly as I processed this information. I actually had heard some things about the Hayes family before. There was a wealthy family in town who had bought property in the city, and their money-making methods were connected to the Hayes family business. I had overheard once that they supposedly dealt in things that could not stand the light of day. It was not exactly illegal, but it operated in very grey areas. According to what that family had said, the Hayes household was completely chaotic. The current head of the Hayes family, Victor Hayes, was a complete psychopath. He had crippled his own genius younger brother and turned his brother's fiancée into his mistress. He was also having an affair with his sister-in-law. He was absolutely worthless human being. He had produced a son, Dylan Hayes, who was no better, having inherited all of his father's worst traits. It sounded like he and Victoria Pierce would make a perfect match. Unfortunately for her, they apparently had standards and were not interested in Victoria Pierce. I made a small sound of disgust. My father reacted as if I had triggered some kind of alarm and immediately started cursing at me. "What are you scoffing at? I am telling you, your worthless life getting to marry into the Hayes family is already the greatest blessing you could hope for in this lifetime. Do not be ungrateful." I responded in a flat tone. "Oh, would Victoria Pierce like to have this blessing instead? Oh wait, I forgot. Even a rotten place like the Hayes family will not have Victoria Pierce. So who exactly has the worthless life here?" My mother looked like she was about to faint from rage again. How tedious. Actually, I knew my father wanted to hit me, but perhaps considering that I was the concentrated embodiment of all our family's worst traits, essentially his Pro-Max version, he could only hold back, terrified that I might actually pick up a knife and go head-to-head with him. When we got home, Victoria Pierce rushed up to us but froze when she saw me, clearly not expecting that I would be coming back at all. I was still wearing my old farm clothes, smiling sweetly as I greeted her. "Well, hello there, my naturally worthless adopted sister. What is that expression? You do not like me?" Victoria Pierce stood there stunned, her face turning white with anger. After all these years in high society, where everyone maintained polite facades, she had never encountered someone who would launch verbal poison right from the start. She finally recovered enough to throw herself into my mother's arms with dramatic wailing. "Mama, sister dislikes me so much. Maybe I should just leave after all." I shrugged my shoulders casually. "Go ahead and leave. Who is stopping you? Please, get lost." I stayed at the house for several days, during which nobody wanted to deal with me. But they also did not dare to actually deny me food, because I would genuinely march into the kitchen and loudly demand to know if they were trying to starve the Pierce family's biological daughter to death. Any underhanded tactics were completely useless against me. After a few days, perhaps realizing they truly could not manipulate me but also could not send me back, my father finally addressed me grimly at the dinner table. "I have arranged for your school enrollment. You will be in the same class as Dylan Hayes, your fiancé. I am telling you, behave yourself. Dylan Hayes is not like us. He will not indulge your behavior." I swallowed my food, washed it down with fruit juice, and replied casually, "When have any of you ever indulged my behavior? Are you referring to putting bitter melon juice in my apple juice as indulgence?" My father whipped around to glare at the household staff, slamming the table. "What kind of work are you people doing?" Victoria Pierce's face turned red and white alternately. I smiled sweetly at her. "Sister, what is wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Where does it hurt? Your conscience." Victoria Pierce's eyes were about to fill with tears again. Over the past few days, her tears had not been fake anymore. I had genuinely made her cry with my words. Her poor little face was practically swollen from all the crying. Well, she deserved it. She never learned her lesson and kept trying to provoke me. The next day, for safety reasons, Victoria Pierce and I went to school separately. She left first while I arrived later, having to visit the principal's office to handle paperwork and make myself known. So when I entered the classroom, Victoria Pierce had already had plenty of time to spread whatever lies she wanted about me. Everyone in the classroom looked up at me standing on the platform with expressions containing disgust, curiosity, and excitement. These wealthy children were all equally vicious. This class had lacked someone for them to torment for entertainment, and my appearance had them practically trembling with anticipation. My supposed fiancé, Dylan Hayes, sat in the classroom like he was holding court, his legs spread wide as he watched me with an unreadable expression. My father had probably briefed him in advance, so the teacher assigned me to sit next to Dylan Hayes. He was taking up 2 seats by himself, his legs spread wide open. I walked over, looked directly into his eyes, and spoke calmly. "Come on, take off your pants. Let me see what kind of massive equipment requires you to spread your legs like that. People who do not know better might think you have a tumor growing in there that would kill you if you closed them." The previously noisy classroom fell into complete silence. Nobody had expected me to open my mouth and say something like that. The Hayes family wielded considerable power throughout Chicago, essentially controlling everything with an iron fist. In his entire life, nobody had ever dared to speak to Dylan Hayes this way. It took Dylan Hayes a long time to process that I was actually insulting him. I had to say, with reaction time like that, he would have been verbally eviscerated within 3 days back in my small town. Absolutely pathetic. Dylan Hayes slammed his hand on the desk and shouted, "What the hell are you saying? Say it again if you dare." I looked at his legs, now properly closed together, and smiled slightly. "Well, closing them did not kill you after all, did it?" Dylan Hayes was shaking with rage, pointing at me as he made his threats. "Luna Hayes, do not think that just because my father likes you, you can talk to me like this. I may not be able to kill you, but I can make you wish you were dead. You can marry into the Hayes family as a living corpse." I placed my school bag on the desk and began slowly rolling up my sleeves, speaking as I did so. Little bird, talking so big and bold. The next second, with my sleeves properly rolled up, I delivered 2 sharp slaps, one forehand and one backhand. Dylan Hayes' face swelled up immediately, his pupils practically experiencing an earthquake. I ignored him completely, turned around to sit down, then suddenly seemed to remember something. "Spread your legs near me again, and I will slap you each time. Consider carefully how many teeth you can afford to lose." The news that I had nearly slapped Dylan Hayes to death on my first day of school spread throughout the entire school before class was even over. Everyone wanted to see exactly when I would die. After all, while Dylan Hayes might not be able to defeat me in a fight, no matter how capable I was, I could not fight off multiple attackers at once. If he really wanted to use underhanded methods against me, it would be very difficult for me to escape death. Victoria Pierce, that foolish pig, had not given up on trying to frame me. Within a couple of days, rumors were flying everywhere that I was someone who had killed my own grandmother and had used unknown methods to survive alone from age 7 to the present. She did not say it directly, but she might as well have. She was spreading stories that I had worked as a prostitute back in the small town. This actually made me laugh out loud. Anyone could go ask around in that town, and I would love to see who would dare to nod in agreement. Of course, these pampered young lords and ladies would never actually go ask. They would just cover their noses and show disgusted expressions when I walked by. Just as Victoria Pierce was once again attempting to explain things on my behalf in that transparent way of hers, I grabbed a handful of her hair and delivered 4 sharp slaps, alternating between forehand and backhand. This sent Victoria Pierce into screaming hysterics right on the spot. I held tightly to her hair, leaned down close to her face and said, "Come on, repeat what you just said, word for word." Victoria Pierce was trembling with fear all over. I did not mean it that way, sister. I am sorry. Please do not pull my hair, I beg you." I looked at her with a slight smile. "I told you to repeat it. Do you not understand human speech?" Victoria Pierce was in too much pain to continue, so she stammered through her tears. I said you killed your own grandmother. And in the small town, you used unknown methods to grow up to this age." I tightened my grip on her hair. "So explain to everyone exactly what you hope to accomplish by saying these things." Victoria Pierce could not hold it together anymore and began crying hysterically, trying to grab my hands with hers. "You cannot hit me. Daddy and Mama will not let you get away with this. I am going to make sure you die." I laughed coldly. "Go ahead and tell on me. If someone stands up for you, I will admit I am not capable enough." The other students had not anticipated that I would not only directly confront the rumors, but also give Victoria Pierce a beating. Everyone sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they were seeing. The Pierce family was considered upper middle class, with only 2 or 3 families ranking higher. So everyone knew very well that Victoria Pierce could not be crossed. Never mind that Dylan Hayes would stand up for her. Even if the Pierce family wanted to retaliate, it would be quite troublesome. Now she was being bullied by me. some farm girl who had appeared out of nowhere, to the point where she could only sob and threaten to go home and tell on me. It was absolutely incredible. That evening when I returned home, Victoria Pierce was already in my mother's arms, crying inconsolably. Her face was swollen like a pig's head, and when she cried, she looked even more like a pig's head. I could not help but laugh when I saw her. I really could not be blamed for this reaction. It was genuinely amusing. A pig's head weeping in agony. That is exactly what I was thinking, and I actually did laugh out loud. My mother glared at me with fury. Why did you bully Victoria? How exactly has Victoria gotten in your way? If you hate us for abandoning you, you should not take it out on Victoria. I shrugged my shoulders. Ask your precious fake daughter. If she had not provoked me, would I have been bored enough to slap her around? Victoria Pierce's face was so swollen at this point that she could barely speak clearly, as if her mouth were full of water. Mama, I was just saying that sister had lived such a hard life before, feeling sorry for her and wondering how she managed to grow up, hoping everyone would treat her better. My mother became even angrier, pointing at me and shouting, "You are nothing but an animal. Victoria is so kind-hearted and you still laid hands on her. I should never have given birth to you. You should have died in that broken-down ranch along with your plague-carrying grandmother." My expression immediately turned ice cold. Do not push me to slap you too. My mother's face flushed bright red. She wanted to say more, but seeing my expression, she swallowed her words, because she knew very well that I absolutely would slap her. After all, it would not be the first time. I glanced at both of them with contempt and went upstairs. Victoria Pierce's patience with me had probably reached its limit. She understood very clearly that she could not marry into the Hayes family, at least not now. After all, Dylan Hayes was worthless and he could never go against his father's demands. But she also did not want me to successfully marry in either. She wanted me to be completely disgraced, even to the point where I could not marry Dylan Hayes and would have to marry Victor Hayes instead, becoming Dylan Hayes's stepmother. This would be far worse than marrying the son. Marrying the son might be privately unpleasant, but marrying the father could be a matter of life and death. Since Victoria Pierce wanted me to marry Victor Hayes so badly, perhaps it would be better to let her marry Victor Hayes instead. After all, was this not what she wanted? As for Dylan Hayes, before I publicly humiliated him, he would not have minded marrying me and keeping me as a plaything, but after I made him lose face so dramatically, he probably wanted me dead. But who cared? He was just a worthless person anyway. These people were overlooking one simple reality. While I had inherited all the family's negative traits, I had not missed out on the positive ones either. During the first midterm exams, I scored first in the entire grade, ahead of the second-place student by 15 points. Everyone's eyes nearly popped out of their heads. After all, everyone had assumed that I, some country girl who grew up on a ranch, had never received a proper education or seen the world. Even if I had been a good student before, what could that possibly amount to? This result was essentially a slap in the face to everyone's assumptions. My parents could hardly believe it either. But since nobody in the school would dare help me cheat, they had to accept that I really was their child, not only in terms of flaws, but also in terms of intelligence. My father looked at me with considerably more warmth and even warned Victoria Pierce to stop targeting me. After all, Victoria Pierce was a beautiful idiot who ranked at the very bottom of the grade. A useful biological daughter was worth paying attention to. If before my father had only wanted to use me to gain resources from the Hayes family, now he had bigger plans. He wanted me to marry in and then help him from the inside to take down the Hayes family entirely. This made me laugh. Where exactly did this confidence come from, thinking I would agree? Or perhaps he was promising that after taking over the Hayes family, the Pierce family assets would also be mine. Did he think these things would make me excited? The Pierce family already belonged to me. From the moment I returned, it was destined that the Pierce family would never give Victoria Pierce a single penny. I had absolutely no intention of making any sacrifices, because all of this was what they owed me. The weekend passed, and when I returned to school, I noticed the atmosphere was not right. Dylan Hayes looked at me like I was already dead, while Victoria Pierce appeared quite pleased with herself. I thought about it and suddenly remembered someone, the scholarship student I had knocked out of first place. Private preparatory schools needed outstanding students for their reputation, so they had many impoverished students who had tested in on merit and received full scholarships. The previous first-place student had been one of these. Before I arrived, she had consistently held the top spot. Every day was nothing but studying, eating, and sleeping. Nobody cared about the life or death of a scholarship student. If this scholarship student died and could drag me down with her, then her death would be even more valuable. I did not know exactly what they planned to do, but I knew they would not succeed, because I was not the only one who had noticed my abilities. The Hayes family's other son had noticed me too, Alexander Hayes, the one whose legs had been broken by Victor Hayes, condemned to spend the rest of his life wasting away in a wheelchair. Dylan Hayes' uncle. Alexander Hayes was 6 years older than me. He was actually the son of Victor Hayes' stepmother. With only a shared father, no wonder Victor had been so ruthless with him. Of course, even if they had been full siblings, he probably would not have been much more merciful. Alexander Hayes was a genuine genius, the kind who would make champion-level intellectuals look inadequate by comparison. When he approached me, I had just left school and was planning to cooperate with Dylan Hayes and Victoria Pierce by heading toward a small alley. I had not walked far when a man in a wheelchair, devastatingly handsome, stopped in front of me. I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. Alexander Hayes. Alexander Hayes nodded. I am pleased you recognize me. I know you have your own plans, but I still want to try to persuade you. I gestured for him to continue speaking. Alexander Hayes had a very pleasant voice. Dylan Hayes has inherited all of his father's worst traits. While his intelligence leaves something to be desired, you cannot imagine how vicious his methods can be. I smiled. Do you know what kinds of things I have done? Alexander Hayes replied. I have heard some stories. I continued smiling. The fact that you came to persuade me proves you do not know very much. I assume you want to team up with me, for revenge on your behalf and mine. Alexander Hayes remained silent. I continued, but Alexander Hayes, this approach of yours for now does not impress me, so step aside and do not interfere with my business. I have no particular habit of avoiding conflict with disabled people. Alexander Hayes did not get angry. Instead, he smiled. He seemed to have a very good temperament. He wheeled to one side and then recited a string of numbers. This is my phone number. If you change your mind, you can call me. I very much look forward to meeting with you again. After speaking, a bodyguard dressed entirely in black emerged from behind him and pushed his wheelchair away. I watched his retreating figure with narrowed eyes. This Alexander Hayes was not simple either, but that was normal. With his intelligence, appearance, and circumstances, it would be truly strange if he were simple. I walked forward slowly and soon saw the girl I had displaced from first place. She was wearing her school uniform, her hands gripping her pant seams tightly, her voice trembling. You do not move. I lazily put my hands in my pockets, not giving her time to go through her prepared routine, and asked directly, They told you I have a mental illness and cannot handle provocation, so they want you to provoke me, force me to have an episode, attack you, and then you will testify against me in court, right? The girl's face went pale and she bit down hard on her lower lip. I shrugged. They lied to you. They actually want me to kill you outright. After all, if you were just injured, The Pierce family could easily cover it up. The girl's expression changed, and she stepped back 2 paces, but seemed to remember something, gritted her teeth hard, and spoke. Luna Hayes, saying these things will not help you. You stole my first-place ranking, and my scholarship was reduced by $30,000. You are essentially forcing me to die. They were right about you. You are naturally evil. You cannot stand to see anyone else succeed. You forced your own grandmother to death and survived by working as a prostitute on that ranch to pay for school. Now you want to harm me too. I fell silent. Whoever had written this script for her had done a terrible job. There was absolutely no bite to it at all. I wanted to unleash some verbal venom, but then I thought about her situation. Like me, this girl only had a grandmother. But her grandmother was still alive. I looked at her face and saw pain, struggle, and a kind of despair about life. I was quiet for a moment, then finally spoke. They threatened you using your grandmother, did they not? The girl froze. I walked over and patted her shoulder. Listen, these words cannot hurt me. Nothing can hurt me. I do have a mental condition, but I take medication and have it well controlled. Give up. The girl seemed unprepared for me to say such things. She hesitated, then stammered. No, you cannot leave. Could you not just slap me once? She was completely panicked. Victoria Pierce had told her that if I did not leave marks on her body, her grandmother would not have good days ahead. She had grown up depending on her grandmother. Her grandmother could not come to any harm. I looked at her as she swallowed nervously, almost pleading. You said yourself that the Pierce family could cover it up. Just please, I beg you, slap me once. You will not suffer any consequences. I sighed deeply. I only slap bitches and idiots. Then I called out behind me, Alexander Hayes, I agree to work with you. My sudden change of mind was not because I had suddenly gained respect for Alexander Hayes, but because I no longer wanted to let those 2 bitches live comfortable lives. According to my original plan, they could have continued their antics for another year or 2 while I played with them, until I had accomplished what I wanted to do, and then I would send them to hell. But looking at the situation now, I decided against it. I would send them to their deaths immediately. Alexander Hayes's voice came from behind me. Do not worry. I have already made arrangements for her grandmother's safety. I will have people escort her home. I nodded and turned to leave. As I passed Alexander Hayes's wheelchair, someone grabbed my sleeve. Could I possibly take you to dinner? We could discuss our arrangement. I tilted my head and thought about it. All right. Alexander Hayes and I sat down in a private club that he owned, one of his secret businesses. The privacy was excellent, so we did not need to worry about being discovered by others. Alexander Hayes possessed a great deal of evidence against the Hayes family, or rather, against Victor Hayes specifically. Over the years, he had been completely cut off from any involvement in Hayes family business. Victor Hayes was guarding against him. All these years, Victor Hayes had been looking for ways to kill him permanently. After all, Alexander Hayes only had crippled legs, not a damaged brain. If he really wanted to build up some business ventures to compete directly with the Hayes family, it would not be particularly difficult. Facts had proven this point as well. Alexander Hayes said, "Should I call you Luna Hayes or Luna Cross?" I replied indifferently, "It does not matter, either is fine. They are just names." He smiled. "Then Luna Cross it is. I know some things about your past, and I also know that you are not genuinely mentally ill." This was when I truly began to find things interesting. All these years, in order to survive, to avoid being tormented, to live without being controlled by anyone, I had been forcing myself to become crazy. I had convinced even myself that I was sick, yet here was someone telling me I was not actually ill. Alexander Hayes continued, I have seen your genetic report. You did not inherit the various mental conditions that run in your family. But your family members seem rather stupid, not even noticing when the documentation was switched. I narrowed my eyes and asked, "Who exactly is Victoria Pierce?" Alexander Hayes smiled. "Victor Hayes's illegitimate daughter. Interesting, is it not?" So this was the real reason Victor Hayes absolutely refused to allow Victoria Pierce to marry into the Hayes family. Of course not. Victoria Pierce and Dylan Hayes were biological siblings. Alexander Hayes continued. Victor Hayes's first wife, Dylan Hayes's biological mother, was an extremely strong-willed woman. She could never have accepted that during her pregnancy, her husband was having affairs with other women and had a daughter the same age as her son. If Victor Hayes's first wife had learned about this, there would have been absolute chaos. At the time, Victor Hayes was in a critical period of seizing power and could not afford any problems. It happened that you were born on the same day as Victoria Pierce. Victor Hayes switched your genetic reports and used various methods to make Victoria Pierce the Pierce family's adopted daughter. I smiled emotionlessly. He also did not want his daughter calling another man father. How touching. Alexander Hayes chuckled softly. Indeed. I know you want everything the Pierce family has, and I need Victoria Pierce to return to the Hayes family to help me stir up trouble. I looked at him, considered for a moment, and finally nodded. All right, I agree. Alexander Hayes moved very quickly. Almost as soon as I had laid the groundwork on my end, he delivered paternity test results proving Victoria Pierce and Dylan Hayes were siblings directly to my father's desk. This was absolutely spectacular, truly spectacular. My father was shrewd enough that when he saw this report, what could he possibly not understand? He sat there with trembling hands, nearly ready to storm over and directly confront Victor Hayes about what this meant. But Victor Hayes did not know yet. After my father calmed down, he suddenly approached me. He told me about this matter and asked what I planned to do. Looking into his eyes, I could tell he truly intended to hand over the Pierce family to me eventually. No matter how much he hated me, he could not deny that the benefits of betting on me were enormous. However, he had miscalculated one thing. I was not as cold-blooded as he was. I looked at the report in my hands and said casually, "Why not tell Dylan Hayes's biological mother first? That woman is formidable. Tell her and you will not need anyone else to lift a finger. Victor Hayes will get exactly what he deserves." While Dylan Hayes's biological mother would not let the Hayes family fall into Alexander Hayes's hands, killing Victor Hayes was just the first step. The news got back very quickly, and Dylan Hayes's biological mother immediately flew back from Europe. The Hayes family descended into complete chaos. Almost every day, Alexander Hayes would give me updates on the drama. Dylan Hayes's biological mother wanted to kill Victor Hayes and also wanted to kill Victoria Pierce, because Victoria Pierce had inheritance rights that would damage her son's interests. How could she possibly allow her son's interests to be damaged? During class one day, Victoria Pierce was dragged out of the classroom by Dylan Hayes's biological mother, who slapped her and sent her flying. "You are just as cheap as your mother, planning to ruin my son for the rest of your life, are you not? Let me tell you, you little bastard, even if you are Victor Hayes's biological daughter, so what? You will never get a penny of Hayes family money. If you get near my son again, I will definitely kill you." I forgot to mention that Victoria Pierce still did not know about any of this. I helpfully reminded her from the sidelines. "Sister, this is your stepmother." Both Victoria Pierce and my mother, who had rushed to the school, stood there stunned. I just watched as my mother and Dylan Hayes's biological mother tore into each other. I had to admit, my mother truly loved Victoria Pierce. She genuinely treated Victoria Pierce as her own child. For a moment, I did not know whether to call her stupid or to say Victoria Pearce was lucky. That evening, my mother held my father and sobbed hysterically. "William, we cannot let Victoria suffer this humiliation. Victoria is our child." My father looked at her. "We have to send Victoria back. We must send her back. This is the only chance we have to destroy the Hayes family." Victoria Pearce was crying alongside them. "Daddy, I am your daughter. I do not want to go back. If I go back, I will die." I came downstairs and commented blandly, "No, you will not die. Victor Hayes will not let you die. If you died, would he not just be letting Dylan Hayes's biological mother get the upper hand again?" Victoria Pearce froze, then screamed and tried to rush at me to attack. At that moment, the door opened and Alexander Hayes entered. He made eye contact with me, then spoke to his bodyguards. "Go bring the young lady home." Then he looked at my father. "Mr. Pearce does not mind, I hope. After all, this is a Hayes family child who should return home." My father knew Alexander Hayes was not a simple person, but he was delighted to see Alexander Hayes opposing Victor Hayes, so naturally he would not object. Victoria Pearce was taken away just like that. What happened next did not really concern me very much, because Victoria Pearce had no time to bother with me anymore. Dylan Hayes's biological mother was practically trying to kill her. Alexander Hayes would broadcast segments of the Hayes family drama to me whenever he was bored. This chaos continued for about 3 months, and then Victoria Pearce died. How did she die? She fell from an upper floor. They said she fell, but actually she had been trying to use Dylan Hayes to force his biological mother to leave her alone, but her former beloved, now her biological brother, pushed her down. As for Victor Hayes, he had a stroke from the shock, because Victoria Pearce fell and died right in front of his eyes. Victor Hayes immediately lost consciousness and became a paralyzed invalid from the stroke. Dylan Hayes's biological mother wanted all the assets to go to Dylan Hayes and planned to deal with Alexander Hayes. But unfortunately for her, Alexander Hayes had prepared contingencies long ago. The events continued to unfold, but I had lost interest. Because I had finally obtained what I had wanted from the beginning, the ability to build a proper grave for Grandmother Rose. When Grandmother Rose died, I had no money. After cremation, her ashes had been stored at the funeral home. The funeral director, taking pity on me, agreed to wait until I reached adulthood. As long as I could buy Grandmother Rose a burial plot before I turned 18, that would be sufficient. I bought Grandmother Rose her resting place and brought the other Pearce family members to visit her grave. I made them make up for all the wrongs they had done to Grandmother Rose, including my mother. My mother hated Grandmother Rose because Grandmother Rose had been a suspicious old woman who always felt that my mother and father did not want to care for her in her old age and were plotting to harm her. But how could this be called paranoia? These were facts. My father had grown up poor, never having enough to eat or proper clothes to wear. Grandmother Rose had been strict, always suspecting he was not studying seriously and was bullying other people. So my father hated her. This animal never considered that these were all true facts. Because he did not want to accept responsibility, he wanted to blame Grandmother Rose, claiming she was controlling and paranoid. A painful family background, he said. If he wanted to know what pain really was, I would show him genuine pain. As for how I forced them to keep vigil and pay respects to Grandmother Rose, it was actually quite simple. I had them kidnapped and brought there. They could not leave until they had completed 7 full days. I had to thank Alexander Hayes for his assistance with this. After Grandmother Rose's funeral was complete, I left the country. I left using Pearce family money. I really did not want to remain in the country and have to look at those 2 disgusting faces. With my intelligence, I could easily apply to Ivy League undergraduate programs anyway. The farther I went, the better my mood became. I did not have to see those revolting faces anymore. As for my mother, well, she went insane, but not completely insane. She could not handle Victoria Pierce's fate, nor could she handle learning she had been deceived for so long. Eventually, she was semi-forcibly committed to a care facility. My father found another woman and wanted to have another child. He discovered he was no longer capable of reproduction. When I learned this news while abroad, I burst out laughing, because naturally, I was the one responsible for this too. While I was studying at Harvard, I often thought back to those events. I remembered Grandmother Rose teaching me to read, remembered her solitary figure chopping firewood for my warmth during cold winters, remembered how even when she was gravely ill, she still worried about me going hungry. She was the only person in this world who had truly loved me. And those so-called relatives were nothing more than a pack of beasts in human skin. Alexander Hayes would occasionally send me messages, updating me on the Hayes family aftermath. Victor Hayes eventually died alone in the care facility. Dylan Hayes inherited the family business, but was quickly sidelined by his mother, becoming a powerless figurehead. And Alexander Hayes, that clever man, eventually reclaimed everything that rightfully belonged to him through legal means. Sometimes I would wonder, if I had not met him, it might have taken me many more years to complete my revenge. But ultimately, revenge was never my final goal. I just wanted fair treatment, wanted those who had hurt me and Grandmother Rose to pay the price. Now I had my own apartment in Boston, was studying subjects I enjoyed, and had made several genuine friends. I learned how to interact normally with people, how to control my emotions, how to live properly in this world. I was no longer the crazy girl swinging a sickle on the ranch, nor the troubled teenager spewing venom. I became Luna Cross, an ordinary girl with past trauma who was working hard to heal herself. When classmates asked about my hometown, I would tell them I came from a beautiful small town where I had a beloved grandmother, vast fields, and simple, honest people. I would not tell them about those dark experiences, because those were in the past. But I would never forget Grandmother Rose's teachings. This world contains both kindness and evil. Some people will hurt you, but others will love you. The important thing is learning to distinguish between them, learning to protect yourself, and learning to protect those worth protecting. Every year on Grandmother Rose's death anniversary, I would fly back to visit her. I would sit by her grave for a long time, telling her about my recent life, about my new friends, about my academic progress. I would tell her that I had finally learned how to live well, how to protect myself without harming others, how to find my place in this complex world. I think this is what she would have wanted to see most. That girl who had once been abandoned by everyone had finally found her true home. Not that Pierce family house full of deception and betrayal, but the home I built for myself, filled with genuine love and respect. This is my story, a tale of revenge, growth, and ultimate redemption. It taught me that no matter how dark the past may be, as long as you are willing to look forward, someday you will see the light. And those who once harmed us, time will give them the most just judgment. What we need to do is live well, live more brilliantly than they do, live more meaningfully. Perhaps this is the best retaliation against those evil people. In my second year at Harvard, I received unexpected news. Alexander Hayes was getting married. His fiancée was a gentle, beautiful female doctor they had met at a rehabilitation center. She did not care about his leg disability or his complicated family background. She simply loved this intelligent and resilient man. He invited me to the wedding. I wore a light blue dress and sat in the back of the church, watching this man who had once helped me promise his love. At that moment, I suddenly realized that we had both emerged from the shadows of our past. We had both found our own happiness. At the reception after the wedding, Alexander Hayes wheeled over to me. "Thank you for coming," he said, with a tenderness in his eyes I had never seen before. "Thank you for showing me what true love looks like." I replied sincerely. We never again discussed the old Hayes family business or recalled those days filled with calculation and revenge. We simply chatted like ordinary friends about life's small details and hopes for the future. That night, on my flight home, I thought about many things. I thought about Grandmother Rose, about the self who had grown up on the ranch, about those painful years and difficult choices. I realized that revenge was never about making myself better, but about letting go of past burdens and truly moving forward. The current me no longer needed hatred to sustain myself. I had new goals, new dreams, a new life. I wanted to become a psychologist, to help children who were lost in pain like I once was. I wanted to use my experiences to tell them that no matter how dark the past, as long as they did not give up, there would always be a day of light. This was probably what Grandmother Rose hoped to see. Her granddaughter was no longer a revenge goddess driven by hatred, but an ordinary person who used love and understanding to heal the world. On graduation day, I stood alone on Harvard's campus, watching the bustling crowds, feeling an unprecedented peace in my heart. I finally understood what true freedom meant, not the thrill of successful revenge, not the security money brings, but inner peace and hope for the future. I took out my phone and dialed a number I had not contacted in a long time. Hello, this is Luna Cross. I would like to apply to volunteer, helping teenagers with psychological trauma. This was the beginning of my new life and also my true coming of age. I think Grandmother Rose would be proud of me. Her little girl had finally grown into a true adult, someone who could face this world with love. And those who had once tried to destroy me, their endings no longer mattered. What mattered was that I chose light, chose hope, chose to use my experiences to help others. This was the life I wanted, a meaningful life. 5 years later, I opened a psychological counseling center in Boston, specializing in helping teenagers with traumatic experiences. My first client was a 14-year-old girl whose parents, after their divorce, neither wanted her, pushing her back and forth like a ball. Her eyes held the familiar despair and anger I once knew. "They do not love me," she said, her voice choked with tears. I gently took her hand. "I know. I was once abandoned by people who did not love me too. But do you know what? We cannot deny our own worth because of others' lack of love." "Then how did you get through it?" she asked. I thought of Grandmother Rose, of her embraces when I was most helpless, of the strength and kindness she taught me. I met someone who truly loved me. She taught me that love is not charity from others, but the strength within your heart. When you learn to love yourself, you will no longer fear others' lack of love. The girl nodded, a glimmer of light appearing in her eyes. Over the following months, I watched her gradually open her heart, slowly rebuilding trust in the world. I watched her transform from an angry child into a teenager with a warm smile. This reminded me of my former self and made me more certain that the path I had chosen was correct. Every child I helped was like healing my former self. Every successful counseling session made me understand more deeply how precious Grandmother Rose's love for me had been. I began to understand that true strength was not the ability to seek revenge, but the ability to heal. Not the skill to make others suffer, but the courage to make others believe in love again. At Christmas, I received a greeting card. It was from that 14-year-old girl. "Teacher Luna, thank you for teaching me to love myself. I am very happy now. I think I have found my home. Just like you said, home is not a place, but where there is love." At that moment I cried, not from sadness, but from being moved. I finally understood Grandmother Rose's feelings back then. Watching someone you love slowly grow and improve is the most beautiful thing in this world. I remembered what I had said to Grandmother Rose long ago on that small ranch. I want to become the most powerful person, so that everyone who bullies us will be afraid of me. Now I had indeed become the most powerful person. Not because I could harm others, but because I could heal others. Not because I made people afraid, but because I made people feel safe and loved. This was probably what growth meant. From a child driven by hatred to an adult driven by love. From someone who wanted to destroy the world to someone who wanted to heal the world. I think this was the me Grandmother Rose hoped to see, not that revenge goddess wielding a sickle, but this ordinary woman who embraced the world with gentleness and understanding. This was the end of my story, and also the beginning of my new story. My name is Luna Cross. I was once an abandoned child, but now I am someone who helps others find their homes. This is enough.